Hello and welcome to Chymera, Britain's only book festival celebrating science fiction, fantasy and horror writing. My name is Anne Landman and I'm the festival's founder and artistic director. Right about now, I'd hope to be welcoming you to beautiful Edinburgh, to our venue The Pleasance, for a weekend packed with events. Writing workshop, panels, readings, open mics, a quiz, a ceilidh, 2 plays. We had so much in store for you. Thank you for joining us online instead, to be part of our programme from the safety of your homes. We're very excited to still bring you a fantastic lineup of speakers. We'd ask you that you support our speakers, and there's many ways you can do that. You can buy their books or borrow them from the library. You can donate to them directly via their Patreon or Ko-fi. You will find the links for that below in the description. We encourage you to buy a ticket for our events, even the pre-recorded ones. All ticket money will go directly to our speakers. You can also donate to the festival, and all donations via the donation page will be split between our speakers once we've covered our costs like the Zoom account. Thank you again for joining us in this brave new world of digital events. We hope you have a chance to check out all 33 of ours over the weekend. Please let us know what you think of them. Do get in touch via social media, the chat function in Zoom, or drop us an email on info@chimerafestival.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. We hope you have a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to seeing you in person next year for Chymera 2021.
Welcome to this Chymera Festival panel. My name is Anne, and I am here today to talk to Virginia Crowe and Olga Wojtas. I'm very excited. We'll be talking about historical fantasy, which is one of my favorite things, because I love a bit of history and I obviously love fantasy. So I'm really excited to be talking about with these two fantastic writers today. And I'm just gonna get started. We're all very nervous about this, but it'll be fine. So, starting with Olga Wojtas. Give us a wave, Olga. I know it says sparkly tights, which I just adore. Olga is a writer of postmodern crime fiction whose serial humour has been compared to the likes of P.G. Wodehouse, Jasper Fforde, and the Marx Brothers. A journalist for more than 30 years, Olga was the Scottish editor of the Times Higher Education Supplement before she began adding creative writing to her portfolio. She won a Scottish Book Trust New Writers Award in 2015 and has had numerous short stories and several novellas published. Her debut novel, Miss Blaine's Prefect and the Golden Samovar, there it is, was published in the UK and the US to great critical acclaim. She was shortlisted for the inaugural Comedy Women in Print Prize 2019, shortlisted for a Crime Fest Award, and named one of the best mysteries and thrills of the year by Purpose. Her second novel, there it is, Miss Blaine's Prefect and the Vampire Menace was published earlier this year and is currently on the long list for the Comedy Women in Print. Congratulations, Olga.
Thank you.
And our second speaker is Virginia. Virginia Crowe grew up in Orkney, using the breathtaking scenery to fuel her imagination and the writing fire within her. Her favorite genres to write are fantasy and historical fiction, sometimes mixing the two together, such as in her newly published book, Album, which is that one there. She enjoys swashbuckling stories, such as The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, and is still waiting for a screen adaptation that lives up to the book. See, I'm very fond of the BBC one, so we can talk about that later.
Okay.
When she's not writing, Virginia is usually to be found teaching music and obtaining her M.Lit in History of the Highlands and Islands. No, she already obtained her M.Lit in History of Highlands and Islands. She believes wholeheartedly in the power of music, especially as a tool of inspiration. Welcome, welcome. Usually at this point we would have applause from the audience. You're just going to have to imagine the applause happening. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is not your straightforward Chymera panel. It very much demonstrates what kind of width and breadth the genre can bring, because Virginia, yours is very much a historical novel with fantastical elements, and Olga, yours is kind of a crime horror comedy with the horror elements packed in. So why don't we start with each of you telling us a little bit about your books? Virginia, would you like to start?
Yes, well, if there's one thing I love talking about, it's my books. So yeah, thank you. Caledon is it's set in 1746, and it's really it looks at post-Culloden Scotland, and I deliberately took out the Jacobite and Hanoverian sides from it, and I created something that united, a force that united the two sides together against something which was a much bigger threat. And you know, I'm not sure what some historians would say to that, but I think that actually after Culloden, lots and lots of people found they were united in being Scottish, being Highlanders. And so what I did was I awoke Caledon, which is a force that represents Scotland, and set it to work repairing what had happened in the Jacobite uprising.
Fantastic. Olga, what about Miss Blaine?
Well, my heroine, Shona McMonigal, went to the Marcia Blaine School for Girls, which is the school in Muriel Sparks, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. She is now a librarian at Morningside Library. But what happens is that Miss Blaine sends her on time-travelling missions to various places, because the purpose of a Blaine girl's education is to make the world a better place. And Miss Blaine has decided that if she can send someone time traveling, you can make previous worlds a better place as well. So that's the theme behind mine.
And in the first book, you went to Russia?
Yes, went to Imperial Russia, and in the second book, going to a small alpine village in France in the year 1900.
Lovely. So two very different settings, which is very exciting for me. Shall we have a little taster for our audience so they can get a bit of a sense of your books? Virginia, would you start with a short reading?
Yeah, absolutely. I have picked out a little section. It's just a couple of pages. Just a bit of a kind of setting the scene. The guy who it's about at this point is James Ogg. He's run away from Culloden. He's also just left his fiancée and his uncle. His uncle's just been shot, and his fiancée has just been arrested. And he's just left them. He's just run away. So that's where we're up to. So he's sure he's a coward, which so far he does appear to be. He missed his footing and fell, slithering down the wooded hillside until he crashed onto the rocks at the bottom. His senses felt numbed as he lifted his hand up to his head and felt the sticky blood which rushed from it. What a foolish death he would die here, but how fitting it should be an act of shame which killed him. Somewhere, only a short distance from him, the sound of a waterfall could be heard, both heavy and gentle, in a manner which made his head throb even more. It was the hard work and efforts of these falls which had carved out the ravine where he lay. The trees which had broken his fall on the way down clung to the sheer sides and gave the April sky a peculiar crisscross with their branches, which, though budding, had not yet come into full leaf. He realized it was no longer raining. The ground around him was dry, save for the spray from the waterfall, which he noticed with interest was coming into view. He lifted his head up, and, though it spun when he moved, he was surprised to find he was able to rise. At first, he felt his eyes were betraying him, and he screwed them closed before opening them once more. But the peculiar form of the waterfall was indeed beginning to take shape. Two hands with long watery fingers reached away from the rock, and rolling from side to side on wide though fragile shoulders, an ever-changing head appeared. It was queer, the manner in which this form looked so alive in its monochrome appearance, and James Ogg gave a slight cry as two large eye sockets appeared. He would have liked to run, to have turned away and promised himself he had only imagined the whole apparition, but he could not take his eyes from it. It had no mouth, yet as it looked at him, he could hear its liquid voice, as though a peculiar form of telepathy existed between them. Jamie Ogg, it began, its soothing voice neither male nor female in tone. Your coming here was far from misfortune. James looked afraid as it addressed those thoughts he had held in private council. What are you? More than you can comprehend, came the mystical reply. But you must rise, Jamie Ogg. You have work to do. No, he murmured. No man ever survived such a fall as this. And yet you shall. There was almost no inflection to the voice, and its statements were clearly non-negotiable. You were guided here for a purpose, Jamie Ogg. You are no longer the person you were when you fell into this ravine. You have purpose and a role which has been assigned to you. Yeah.
Ooh, thank you so much. Yes, loud applause.
Thank you.
I was thinking about sound effects, but it's not right. Thank you so much. This is such a crucial scene in the book. Thank you so much for reading that. Olga, what did you pick for us?
Right, well, this is just after Shona has arrived in this village, which is called Sans Soleil, which means sunless. She's arrived in this little alpine village, and she's found herself in a cafe where she has met the local worthies. The local worthies being the mayor, the judge, the school teacher, the policeman, and the cheesemonger and undertaker. The cheesemonger and undertaker is one person who has got sort of, interesting multitasking. So this is her in this cafe. I turned to see a young woman silhouetted against the dusk outside. Her figure was what one describes as hourglass, with a tiny cinched-in waist. She wore a thin cotton dress which reached just below her calves, the backlight turning her into that image of Princess Diana, displaying her spectacularly long legs. The dress had a V-neck, and the gold crucifix she was wearing round her neck drew attention to her impressive décolletage. She wore a headscarf, but it was arranged in such a way that stray curls enhanced her fine bone structure. She obviously cared a lot about her appearance. She was, in short, the sort of woman I find it a challenge to like on sight. She waited for her eyes to adjust to the house's darkness, and when they had, she marched straight up to the tall, bewhiskered police officer. "Is there any news?" she demanded. The officer took a step back. "News?" he stuttered. "What sort of news?" She looked as though she was about to punch him, and he took another step back, colliding with the table and sending it clattering across the floorboards. He began to think very slightly better of her. "You know what news?" she snapped. "News of my husband, my beloved Sylvain. Have you found him?" The middle-aged, distinguished undertaker and cheesemonger came up to her and took her gently by the arm. "You know where he is," he said, his voice soothing. "He's dead and buried in the graveyard. You know that, Madeleine. You were at the funeral." Impatiently, she shook her arm free. "Oh, yes, I was at the funeral. But my husband wasn't, since he's not dead." "I can assure you he is," said the undertaker and cheesemonger. "You know why we couldn't let you see the body. It would have been too dreadful for you. But he is in his grave." "He is not dead," said Madeleine distinctly. "You fools, don't talk to me about bodies and graves. If he were dead, I would feel it here." She clasped her hands to her bosom in such a way as to give it quite a lot of uplift. There was another collective sigh from the men. The mayor stepped forward. "Madeleine, you're in the middle of the grieving process. It's a difficult time. We all understand that. You need something to occupy you. I have the very thing. Madame McMonagirl." What? She said impatiently. Mac-money girl? What sort of a name is that? Mine, I said. Don't wear it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So both your books aren't your straightforward fantasy novels. Olga, you've got time travel, and it'll come to no surprise that you have vampires in the new book, the clues in the title. And Virginia, for you have this vast, very historical and very realistic setting, and then you put in this mystical force that is Caledon. How did you decide that that was the kind of novel you wanted to write? Why not just write high fantasy, or in your case, Olga, a straightforward horror novel? Olga, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I'm obviously primarily writing comedy. And the reason I didn't make it straightforward fantasy or horror is part of the humor is coming from the fact that you've got this 21st century person who is parachuted into a bizarre setting that she understands intellectually because she's had this great education, but she doesn't necessarily know exactly what's going on. She's also, she's very dogmatic in her views. She's a very good feminist, and she keeps finding herself in settings where feminism isn't perhaps that well known, and she keeps trying to raise people's consciousness. There's also, I try to do some wordplay between her speaking in a 21st century way. I mean, she can speak Russian and French fairly well, but she sometimes translates directly. So it was partly for the humor that I wanted two societies in collision.
Brilliant. And the vampires in this particular setting?
Vampires in this was partly because I lived in Aberdeen for a long time, and not a lot of people know this, but Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, spent a lot of holidays in Port Errol in Aberdeenshire and visited Slains Castle, which was actually his inspiration. And everybody thinks that Whitby was his inspiration, but it wasn't. It was this castle in Aberdeenshire. So part of me is reclaiming that, to bring that in. And basically, you know, who doesn't like vampires? You know, any opportunity to bring in a vampire, that's great.
I'm a big fan of vampire, so I do agree with you. Virginia, with you, did you? It feels it's a very historical setting that you have, and we'll come to that in a second. And then you've got this special mystical power. Where did that idea come from as a concept? Did you draw from Scottish folklore, or just?
Well, it does feature a lot of Scottish folklore. So ultimately, you meet all these creatures, the Ayla, and one of which is the Loch Ness monster. So that ties in. But I can remember the exact day that this story came into existence. It was the 10th of August, 2013. And the reason I remember is because everyone was at the Runrig party on the moor except me. And I was so gutted about it. I couldn't believe that I didn't get to go. But instead, we went for a walk along the Big Burn in Golspie. And I saw the waterfall. I saw it as a person. And so, you know, I must be one of these really weird people who says that the fantasy they write actually came from their own experience like that. You know, it was really odd. There's like a little viewing platform to go and view the waterfall. And to me, straight away, that was what it was. It was a person. And I've been back, I don't know, 4 times, I think, since then, 5 times maybe. And it's never looked that much like a person. So there was something there at that moment that just kind of spoke to me. And I figured if I saw it like that, then why couldn't someone else see it like that when they were feeling, okay, I'm not comparing myself to like the soldiers who fought in Culloden or anything like that. But, you know, when you're feeling at a low ebb for whatever reason, and you just see something and it just kind of gives you a new spark, and that inspiration just comes from somewhere. So I think in a way I was kind of inspired to write Caledon because I met it, if that makes sense.
That's brilliant. So I keep banging on about the historical aspects of it. That's because I love history. It was one of my favorite subjects at school. When I'm not reading science fiction or fantasy, I read a bit of history, doing a bit of Alison Weir at the moment, a bit of the Tudors. So I really love reading about that aspect of novels. Virginia, you've already said yours is set after the Battle of Culloden, but you don't call it that in the book.
No, I call it Jamosi. So that was what it was at that time. It kind of turned into Culloden a little while afterwards. So Jamosi Moor was actually the site of the battle, and then it became known as Culloden over as the years progressed. So.
And I love that your novel is set very much in that bit of the Highlands. So anything from Inverness kind of upwards, because you've already mentioned Golspie, which features, and then we go to Allapool, which out the door, if you haven't been to Allapool, once we're allowed to travel again, do go to Allapool. It is a stunning little part of the Highlands. And there's a couple of other ones, and you're very much kind of contained in that regionality, and which I really enjoyed.
Thank you. I actually measured everything in terms of, it was really tricky to do, to measure like distances based on who could travel at that speed, what the terrain was. So you had to think, they wouldn't be able to go in a straight line like you can look on the map. They'd have to be going up and down, round, and everything, which was interesting. But yeah, but I think makes it worthwhile, the research. So.
And why did you decide on the aftermath of Culloden, of Jamosi?
I think because there's not that much done about it. So we have a lot of things, a lot of fiction that picks up from Culloden and is based around Inverness and to the south down towards towards Perth and places like that. There isn't that much which is actually set further north, and yet there were some really crucial events at that time that took place in the north. So the Mackenzies, who are kind of underpinning the clan of Caledon, they were largely wiped out in that area at Little Ferry, which is just down the road from Golspie, and that. But most people would never know there had been a battle there. The Battle of Little Ferry was such a small thing, but it happened the day before Culloden, and it had a huge impact on how things panned out at Culloden because it meant those reinforcements never made it. So those sort of things, I feel like they're missed out from history and from historical fiction, and I kind of just wanted to put them back in again.
And did you already know those bits when you started writing, or did you have to go and research?
A bit of both, really. So some of it I'd come across myself because I'm like you. I love history. It's kind of a major hobby of mine. So some of it I'd come across already, but I couldn't believe just how much there was. So when I started researching it, there was loads and just tiny little snippets that come up, and they were almost throwaway remarks even at the time. And that's where the historical fantasy bit comes in, being able to take those snippets and turn them into something much bigger, and stretch them out and make a whole story behind them. It's great.
That sounds great fun. Now, Olga, you've so far explored two different historical settings. So we've got Imperial Russia and 1900 France. They couldn't really be much more different. What drew you to those two settings?
Well, I suppose because I studied modern languages and I studied both Russian and French, so I was drawn to both societies, if you like. In the Russian one, I just think there's something sort of terribly elegant about Imperial Russia. I've read quite a lot of Tolstoy, which I can't claim to have read in the original Russian, but that was basically the original inspiration. And then in France, I lived for a while in France. I was teaching as an assistante in a French school. And I suppose these were the two things that sprang out as being obvious to me, that they were different settings, but they were things that I knew a little bit about. So I just latched onto them.
And then did you do supplementary research?
To begin with, for the first one, I did. And I'd been doing a bit of rereading of Tolstoy, and then I started reading Russian history books. And then I realized this could just go on for all eternity. I had a notebook and I was taking notes, and this notebook was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just decided, chuck it, because it was getting to the stage that I was wanting to shoehorn in little bits of information to show I've done the research. And then you thought, but this isn't actually anything to do with the plot. This is completely irrelevant. So I just threw away all the research, didn't go back to it at all, and just used things either that I remembered, or if there was something specific that I needed, just went back and checked that one thing. Because as I say, research can be so time consuming and you never know when you've finished.
I don't think you're ever finished. I bet Virginia is still researching, although you've got a great excuse.
Well, yes, yeah, it's true.
And actually, Olga, that makes me worried now. You've said you've studied French and Russian, and you've now used those two languages. Are we not going to get any more books?
That's quite worrying. It is quite troubling. I know a bit of Spanish, bit of Italian.
Okay, we'll be okay for a few more books.
Yes.
With your research, did you find it helpful to have points within the story that you needed to hit, or events that you wanted to hit, or situations you wanted to describe, or characters you wanted to bring in? Or did you kind of, nah, I don't need them, I'm not going to use them? Virginia, especially you in particular, who's got quite a lot of relevant people, or even real people.
Well, yeah, I've got a couple of real people sneak in there, but as far as research is concerned, I can't get enough of it. So I'm almost the polar opposite of Olga. So apart from writing historical fantasy, I write historical fiction as well, and one of the things that I think that I enjoy about writing it is going off on a tangent. So you're researching something which is crucial to your book, and then you find out that alongside this there was something else happening, and this person was also involved in this, and so on. And a lot of it never makes its way onto the pages, but I feel like it makes the characters more understandable to me to write them. So they become much more 3D, and I can kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing in the story, because they did something else like 5 years ago or something like that, But that does rely on like having real people featured in there. So yeah, I can see if you're making up all your characters, it doesn't matter quite so much.
But you've got a few real ones.
I do, yes. So I have the Earl of Sutherland, who was a real person, and I think I've pretty much got him spot on, because I think he really was just as totally disinterested in everything as I've painted him. And John Mackay, who I'm sure some people would hate me for what I've done to his character, but it's very difficult to find anything else out about him. So Ensign John Mackay was the one who was responsible for capturing and killing the Mackenzies at Little Ferry, and he actually caught the Earl of Cromarty under the skirts of the Earl of Sutherland's wife's dress. So he actually, John Mackay actually went into Dunrobin Castle and found the Earl of Cromarty hiding there. So he was totally committed to defeating the Mackenzies, and that's about all anyone really knows about him. So I took him as a character and turned him into something which is probably not really what he was like at all. In fact, he stars as my kind of underpinning bad guy throughout it. So I'm waiting to see what Mackay's come back with about that. I'm waiting for someone to say that was my great grandfather. How dare you do that to him? But the information's just not there. So.
Yeah, and it is a fantasy novel.
It's true. That's true. Yes.
You know, Nessie on the front. Come on. And Olga, you've got a wee smattering of real people in your current novel.
I do, yes. In the first one, I don't have anybody actually real in it, but there are references to real people in it. And I also have got references to real things. I like the fact that, you've read it, it's pretty wacky. So much of it is coming from inside my troubled imagination, but there are things that are actually true as well. For example, there was a sect in Russia called the Skotsi, and they basically believed that relations between men and women were immoral. And they were a mixed sect, but they used to lop bits off themselves to make themselves unattractive to the opposite sex. So I've got a reference to that, and somebody reading that will just think, "Aye, right, you just made that up." But no, that is absolutely true. And I've got things like about the invention of the metronome that comes in at some point. But in the second one, I've got two real people. I've got the composer Debussy, and I've got Mary Garden, who was an international opera singer, but she was born in Aberdeen. She was an Aberdonian, and she went to Paris and she became Debussy's muse. And he actually wrote the opera Pelléas et Mélisande for her. So they're both in it, and they are real people. And Debussy was a bit of a lad, and that actually turns into something that's crucial to the plot.
Very much so. What about the cheese making?
The cheese making, yes. That's something that I didn't research tremendously. Cheese is a crucial theme to the book, vampires and cheese, basically. But I must admit, I'm not very good at cheese making myself. I have never actually made cheese, so I sort of glossed over that bit of it. I presumed the cheese maker would know how to do it. So
When he's not busy undertaking, obviously.
Yes.
Oh, shocking. Now, Olga, you mainly have Shona as the main character with a great cast of supporting characters. But Virginia, you have quite a staunch group of characters that are the focus. So you've got Jamie Og, and you've got his cousin and his cousin's sister.
That's right, yeah, Mary. Yeah.
Okay. How different times. And then we've got William and Robert, and I'm forgetting someone. Malcolm,
yeah.
They're quite they're a great group of characters to bring together. When you started out with the novel, did you already know you were going to have this group of characters, or was it Jamie that you started out with and then you collected them in? Or
I started with Jamie and Donnie, so they were the two that I knew I wanted. I knew I wanted one woman. I knew I wanted one Hanoverian and at least one Jacobite. So after that, it kind of just kind of see what happens. And George Murray, who was the son of the Duke of Athol, he had vanished after the 1715 uprising. So it made sense to kind of introduce Malcolm's character as his son. So that kind of, it filled the gap in history where no one really knew what this guy had been up to anyway. So I didn't plan it all out in terms of the characters. I just had these two cousins who I knew I wanted to be central to it, and then it kind of went from there.
there's a lot happening in the book. I mean, they go from Demossy to Alapul to Goldsby to Lairg.
Yeah.
And all across the Highlands. Did you write it all chronologically? Did you set it all out?
I actually did, and I think it might be the first time I've ever written a book like that. You know, normally I pick out the bits I want to write, and I'm like, oh, I've been looking forward to writing this scene. I'm going to do this. But my sisters are kind of my beta readers, and one of them refused to read it unless it was all done in order. So yeah, so it had to be done in order.
That's great. And do you have it? Did you use a map? You already said you measured it all out. Did you have today my characters are in?
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I have a timeline document. I use Scrivener to do my writing, and the first page of it, the first part of the document, is a timeline. So I can see so and so will be here at this point. So and so will be there after 5 days of walking, whatever. Because they seem to walk everywhere. No one goes riding anywhere in my story. Horses just don't seem to exist very much.
There's one.
Yes.
One. But I like that, and it's set over a year, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, sorry?
Was that planned?
Well, big events happen on the anniversary of it starting, which I won't say because that's massive spoiler. So I knew it had to get to that point, but the book is actually, it's divided into 8 parts, but originally it was only going to be the first 6, and then the 2 at the end were going to be in the next book. But again, there was an outcry from my sisters who were like, this is a terrible place to leave it. What are you doing? Put some more in. So the next
you are allowed cliffhangers. Please tell them that cliffhangers are a perfectly suitable device in writing.
I will pass that on.
Yes, honestly.
So yes, it runs a little bit over a year, but it was originally meant to be pretty much exactly a year. Yeah.
And Olga, you also set yourself a time limit, don't you, to your books? Because Shona is only allowed in the past.
She's only allowed 1 week to complete a mission. So basically everything has to happen within these 7 calendar days, which I found extremely stressful when I was writing them, because I kept trying to work out, has this turned into another day or not? I don't set things out in advance. I think of key scenes, and then I write the key scenes, and I don't even have any idea what order the key scenes are in, and then I have to join them up. And it's very stressful then to try and put them into a calendar week. So I know other people have got charts on their writing room walls and they set everything out. Well, I don't know what's happening before I start. It just sort of agglomerates.
So hang on, you don't know what happens before you start writing?
No, I know I've got 3. I know I've got 3 or 4 key scenes that I want to write, but I don't know how they link together or where they're leading. All I know is that it's all got to work out by the end.
Kind of, yeah. So this one, the Vampire Menace, what was your starting point for that one?
The starting point for that one was to decide that it had to be around Bastille Day, because in the previous one, the running gag was that Shona had arrived in Imperial Russia and had no idea what year it was, and she thought it was unprofessional to ask anybody. So she spent her time trying to work out what year it was. So with this, I thought there has to be a specific date. And she picks up a local newspaper and she realizes it's just coming up to Bastille Day, and everything sort of leads from there. So that's what I latched onto with that.
And then you created the village of Saint-Soleil.
Yes.
Which is delightful, I have to say. I mean...
Well, apart from the fact that there is no sun, yes, yes. It's charming, lovely chalets, lots of cows.
I did enjoy the cow. This book is the book for people that like cows, cheese, and vampires.
Yes.
I can't recommend it either.
That sounds perfect for me.
You would enjoy it. It's great. What I really liked about your book, Virginia, is the interplay between that group of characters you have, the friendships that are created between them. Do you have a favorite character? Are you allowed to pick one?
I do have a favorite character. I'm not sure I should admit it though.
Oh, okay. Maybe when you're finished. Which one is your favorite to write?
My favorite to write is probably Malcolm. I like writing from Malcolm's point of view. Yeah, because I think actually, I can kind of see where he's coming from. But my favorite character is definitely Donnie. Yeah.
Oh, Donnie. He's a good character. I do enjoy him.
Thank you.
And they're all great characters. Did you borrow any of their history or their background from? You've already said Malcolm is the son of a real person.
Mm-hmm. No, James was he's completely fictitious, and Donnie is too, although their grandfather. So what happened? I mean, these are things that just don't really, they're all there in my head, but they don't really come out on the pages. So so what happened back to their family that forced them out from the West, that was all real. That all really happened. So that was true. The events that happened to Malcolm and Robert after Jamosi, when they were attacked and everyone hid in barrels because the whole village was attacked by bandits, that was real. That really happened. But I think Malcolm's the only one who actually has a real person ancestry.
What I really like about your book as well is the authenticity. It's the way the places are described and even the language that is being used. Did you find that difficult to write in that kind of older English? It's not quite, but it's you know what I mean.
I have to be honest. I have to be honest, I'm one of these people who will never use one word when 10 will suffice. So writing those descriptions was kind of second nature. The bit I really struggle with is the dialogue. So I wanted to make something with Caledon that was totally readable when they were talking, without going back to using words that we wouldn't know what they mean anymore. So I don't think the dialogue is especially how they would have actually spoken. But I think it needed to be like that so that you can just kind of follow the characters through and get a connection with a modern audience.
And did you catch yourself putting modern words in and then going, oh no, I can't say that?
Yes, I got told off for using the word croft. There were no crofts in 1746. Yeah.
Okay.
So crofting came much later. So yeah, I got told off on a few bits and bobs like that, things that you just don't think about, it's just a part of the Scottish landscape. But yeah, so I got a few slapped wrists about big fun. Yeah.
Did you have that problem, Olga, with any of them?
Well, I was just thinking, you'd already mentioned the Loch Ness Monster. And I had a reference to the Loch Ness Monster in the Imperial Russia one. And I have got an absolutely superb editor who's just wonderful. And she came back and she said, you can't have this. You can't have Loch Ness Monster. And I got very uppity and I was saying, oh, I think you'll find I can. I think you'll find Saint Columba, first met the monster. And she said, no, I'm not objecting to that. But the phrase, the Loch Ness Monster, only came into parlance in the 20th century. So you can't refer to the Loch Ness Monster. You can refer to the monster in Loch Ness. And I just would never have thought of that. And I had it was basically, I had Russians saying, what about the Loch Ness Monster? And she was saying they would not have said that. Mm-hmm. That is the importance of having a fabulous editor.
They're much underrated. Editors are essential.
I agree, but don't tell mine I said that.
I'm sure they'll be watching this to check how you behave yourself. Now, Virginia, yours are definitely part of a series. Do you know what happens from beginning to ending? How many books is it?
There are 6 books, and 6.
Holy.
Yeah. It all reaches a climax on the 14th of May, 1752. So if you know what happens in Scottish history on that date, that's what we're all building up to. So yes, that's where it's going. I'm on with 4 at the moment, so 2 and 3 are already written. So yeah.
That's impressive. And what about you, Olga? Did you know it was going to be a series when you embarked on?
Absolutely not. I had no idea the first one would ever even get published, and I was just so thrilled when Saraban took it on, and I hadn't remotely thought that it might turn into a series. But the second one has come out, and obviously the world in time and space is now my oyster, so she could go anywhere. Who knows, she might even go on a mission to Mars.
The future?
I'm sure time can go forward as well as backwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Must be, yeah.
I'll let you know tomorrow.
So is that what you're working on right now, on the next one, or are you writing?
No, I'm doing a series of e-novellas, which are basically cozy crime. And I've just finished the 9th one of that. And the 10th one has to be finished by the end of June. So I've got to get the finger out for that. But meanwhile, Shona is marinating.
Okay. Have you got a bit of an idea of where she's going to go?
I do, but I'm not telling anybody.
You are catching tease. And how is book 4 coming along, Virginia?
Slowly, I have to be honest. I don't know why, but for some reason I can only write this in summer. So I have like seasons for books, and Caledon gets written in the summer.
Okay.
Don't know
why.
why.
Are you working your other things on the side of this?
Yeah, I have quite a few things going at the same time. I'm terrible. I'm really bad. My organisation is just non-existent. So, but I blame Scrivener.
Yeah.
I blame Scrivener because it's possible to have everything running side by side. So on a normal day, I have 3 different Scrivener programs open, and I can jump between 3 different things.
That's impressive. I get confused if I'm on 3 different Twitter accounts, which I have quite a lot for work.
Can I just ask about Scrivener, because I once went to a sort of introduction to Scrivener and thought my head was beginning to explode. I don't understand how it works. Is it something that you really find helpful in terms of writing? And what's different from just writing in a Word document?
I love that you can plan everything out, and see it all planned. So you can have like your planning down one side of the screen and you're writing down the other, and you can just kind of flip backwards and forwards between the 2 things. So that works really well for me. So like I'm saying about the timeline, being able to have my timeline open and not have to like close one thing, go to another thing, go back and so on like that. But I have to be honest, when I first used Scrivener, I couldn't get it to work. And I think the reason was that I was trying to use everything the first time. And so I realized that all I needed was the bit that let me write. And then after that, I started kind of dipping into the extra bits down the side and stuff. And now I just can't imagine writing on Word anymore.
I'll be contacting Scrivener for a sponsorship deal after this panel. Thank you very much. If you could put yourself into your books, would you be brave enough? Would you put yourself in? And what would your character be?
Does it have to be a pre-existing character?
No, you can make up you can go in as a new character.
Well, I would like to go in. I think everyone has this time zone that they would really, or time era really, rather than time zone, that they would really like to go back to. I think, is there a film called Midnight in Paris? Have you seen that? And it's about people.
Is it a Woody Allen film? I don't. Audience, don't shoot me for not knowing this.
I can't remember, but the premise of it is that when you went to this certain area of Paris, you went back to the time that you wished Paris was in. And I think most people have a time that they wish they could go back to. So, yeah, I think I would quite like to go back into my book. And I have no idea about the character, though. That's really tough. I'm not sure.
Would you join Jamie on his adventures?
I liked it. I'm going to say yes, but I have a feeling if push came to shove, the answer would probably be no. but I like to think it'd be yes.
Olga, what about you?
Well, I am a timid little creature, and I would actually really, really like to be Shona. She is who I would like to be. She's fearless. She's utterly self-confident. She just goes into situations and knows that she's going to be able to get out of them. So I would like to be her.
You have the Doc Martens.
I do indeed, yes.
That's one of my favorite bits about Shona, is that she wears her DMs with everything. That went down really well in Imperial Russia. Now, I've got a feeling we're coming up to the end of our panel. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thanks for sharing your stories and the stories of your books and how they came about. I'm just going to wave them again. There you go, Caledon. Just Virginia's first of 6. My God. That is crazy commitment. And there we go. There's the first in this Blaine and the second in this Blaine. Do seek them out. I cannot recommend these 3 books highly enough. And usually at this point, I would say, please join me in thanking our fantastic speakers. So please, people on YouTube, join me in thanking Virginia and Olga for a fantastic panel. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.